the default version of the treatment. With most patients, one should use the focused, simpler version of the treatment. But if there is marked complexity, use the sexy, broad version. But don't use it routinely, only with those who need it. So complex problems sometimes need complex solutions, but not always. Okay. The last point I want to make, I can be quite quick about. It's how best to improve our response rates with the patients we're seeing in our clinical practice. If you sort of travel around, like I do, meeting treatment researchers, and you ask, how can we improve our response rates? They'll come up with very clever answers. And they will come up with ever more sophisticated treatments. You can do a bit more of this, a bit more of that. You can be mindful, which is very fashionable. You can do ACT. All sorts of things you can do. I'd like to suggest that is not at all what we should be doing. That actually the way to improve response rates is much simpler than that, or much less interesting in a way than that. At least with regard with people with eating disorders. The challenge, I would say, is not in developing more sophisticated treatments, but it's actually in making sure that patients receive treatment. It's actually preventing dropout. Now, I don't know what the situation is in Germany, but it is now very well established in England or the UK that about 50% of patients do not complete treatment. Half the patients do not receive the full length of treatment, they drop out. Half. It is also well established that that half are not well. That half are not stopping attending because I'm better now, thank you. They stop attending either because they don't like the treatment, or they feel the treatment is not helping them, or they feel a failure and not getting better, but they're still unwell. This is bad. The trouble is, those of us who are working clinically, we just remember the people we keep seeing. We forget about the people who drop out. You shouldn't. You should remember the ones that are no longer with you. They still have an eating disorder. So, the question is, how can we help more people stay in treatment so that they get the benefits of treatment? Well, about 7 years ago, I was really distressed to find out that our non-completion rate in Oxford was almost 30%. So almost 30% of our patients were not completing treatment. Now, that means they didn't complete a full 20 sessions of treatment. This I thought was really worrying, because that 30% won't be well. So we tried to work out why people are dropping out and tried to get better at helping people stay in treatment. The next year, we got the dropout rate down to 16%, and the next year down to 13%, and it's remained there ever since. That our non-completion rate, our dropout rate, is always now somewhere between 11 and 15%, which is much, much lower than our original 30%, and much, much lower than the 50% in the National Health Service across England. This means that more people are receiving treatment. This means that our response rates, we can make sense of now, because almost everyone is receiving treatment. The people who do drop out, it's mainly because of practical circumstances, that their job moves them to somewhere else. They have to get a boyfriend who lives somewhere else and want to go somewhere else. often for practical reasons that have nothing to do with their eating disorder. So what was the magic we did to keep people in treatment? Well, it wasn't sophisticated. We actually tried to pay attention to not dropping out in every treatment session. The top of our mental agenda in every single treatment session is the patient happy with the treatment? Is the patient engaged with the treatment? And if not, instead of what we used to do, in a very English sort of way, not talk about it, because it was too embarrassing, we actually raised the subject. So if we had the slightest sense that someone is unhappy with treatment, we talk about it. If we had the slightest sense that they don't want to be with us, we would talk about it. And we're engaging. We try to really help patients stay in therapy. That's all we did. The only other sort of minor thing was, which is probably which you would do anyhow, was make sure that the treatment appointments were at a time that suited the patient. So people who've got children, we took account of childcare. People who are in employment, they don't take time off work. So we tried to make the appointment times optimal for the patient, and we were just engaging, and if we sensed there were problems with their engagement, we'd talk about it. That's all we did. And we dropped our non-completion rate down from 30% to 13%. So, how to improve treatment response rates, I don't think involves making treatments ever more sophisticated. The best thing you can possibly do is just keep people in treatment, at least with regard to people with eating disorders. Help them stay in treatment. It's difficult for patients to have treatment for an eating disorder, they're ambivalent. You have to help them stay in treatment. So to summarize, what does CBT target? It targets psychopathology, not a diagnosis. If this psychopathology is present in different disorders, the treatment may be relevant to different disorders. We don't have treatments for diagnoses, we have treatments for psychopathology. Do complex problems require complex solutions? Sometimes, but not always. How can we best improve our response rates? By paying attention to engagement, helping people stay in treatment. And I think that some of these points aren't specific to CBT, but the same points could be made with regard to other psychological treatments, other psychotherapies. I've just happened to talk about CBT, but I think actually virtually all these points apply to other psychotherapies as well. Thank you.